birds see okay?
You're retired at this point. You don't need to be driven by the cell phone.
All set.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Rick.
Hi, thank you much for coming. Today we'll explore and learn about many natural wonders around the world that are simply magnificent to behold. First up is Victoria Falls. In 1855, Dr. David Livingstone named it after Queen Victoria. However, the locals call it the Smoke That Thunders. It's the largest waterfall or curtain of water in the world, and is one of the 7 wonders of the world. It measures 1 mile wide by 360 feet tall. It's on the border between Zambia to the north and Zimbabwe to the south. It's in 2 national parks, and it's midway along the course of the Zambezi River. Its flow is 5 million cubic feet of water every minute, but more in the wet season. Its sheer size alone allures hundreds of thousands of tourists to see it. And what's wonderful about it is you can actually get real close to it without falling over. There's a special area that you can get right here because the water goes backwards here, right here. And we will see how the water falls into a deep channel that's about 200 feet deep. There's a bridge here, and it goes into a gorge here that we'll get to. Before that, I wanted to show you that there's islands before the water falls, and these islands, maybe elephants sometimes go there, and they tread the water, and they risk their lives to be able to get to. There's a lot of lush greenery here that they like on these islands just before it falls over. The water goes. And the water then, we saw the bridge there, it goes through a gorge going on its course. And this gorge is about 200 feet wide and about 400 feet tall, called the Patoka Gorge. And when the water then flows into a stream, there's an interesting phenomenon which flows this way, but there's a phenomenon known as the Zambezi wave. It's a continuous wave that flows backwards against the flow of the river, and you can actually surf it because there's a rock ledge under these that makes it do that. It's about 15 feet tall, and people just continuously surf it or kayak it. And that's an interesting phenomenon right there. Next up is Ixuzu Falls, or the Big Water in South America. It straddles Argentina and Brazil, mainly in the south part of Brazil and Argentina where they meet. And 80% of it's in Argentina. It comprises 150 to 300 separate waterfalls in a horseshoe crescent shape over a mile wide. There's an upper Ixuzu and a lower Ixuzu. And there's a U-shaped cliff within it that makes a 260-degree waterfall there called the Devil's Throat. This is where the river has made 14 waterfalls plunging more than 300 feet. The whole area is made up of 2 national parks and is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. In total, it contains some 2,000 plant species, 80 tree species, 400 bird species, with ocelots, jaguars, caimans, tapirs, giant anteaters, and howler monkeys. Even swifts nest behind the falls. These cascading waterfalls are a spectacular sight, attracting 2 million visitors a year. The average water flow is 60,000 cubic feet of water per second, and about 450,000 feet per second in the rainy season from November to March. It produces 1/2 the electricity for both Brazil and Argentina, and then the river runs for 820 miles. But sometimes there's a lot more water in it, where you saw the tourists were able to stand, and it just overflows with water sometimes. Next up are the Jog Falls. These are in southern India. It's India's 2nd tallest waterfall, and it gets enormous when the monsoon rains fall, and this is the kind of falls you get, about 830 feet tall. And now we're going to talk about animals that change their physical environment. And there are 3 raptor birds in northern Australia known to purposely start brush and forest fires. They are the brown falcon, whistling kite, and black kite. When a fire breaks out in the wilderness, these birds sometimes pick up small, smoldering sticks with their beaks or talons to new grass and forested locations up to a half-mile away. The grasses then catch fire, and insects like grasshoppers or small mammals like rodents and some reptiles then scuttle out of harm's way. These raptors are eagerly waiting nearby and circle in the air, catching them or pounce on them for a tasty meal. So they purposely set fires this way in the outback in Australia. These birds take advantage of spontaneous events to control their environment. These brush fires are really beneficial for forest and dry grasslands as they burn away dead plants, tall grasses, dead brush to make room for a new generation of plants. And also seeds are exposed during these fires and fall to the ground and then sprout new growth. This is good for land management and is a natural way for the forest or open grassland to renew itself. Who would have ever thought that birds could do this? Another example of animals that change and manipulate their local environments to their favor is in sub-Saharan Africa. Elephants in need of potassium and salt find areas where termite mounds were or once were, and then are, and then have exposed soil around them rich in minerals the elephants need. Since elephants have a plant-based diet, important nutrients can be obtained by adjusting this soil. So the elephant families and herds scoop and dig the dirt with their trunks and large feet, like we're seeing here. So they dig for the soil that they need to ingest. And over time, they make substantial holes or depressions in the ground. These holes then fill with water during the rainy season and thus store water in the arid, dry, and semi-desert area. So they actually make water holes doing this over time. And these ponds then become a needed and necessary oasis for other thirsty animals and reptiles to come to. This then attracts predators like hyenas or leopards to attack lingering, water-deprived large prey. These animal-made ponds become mud baths for the elephants to roll in, over here, and their location becomes embedded in the elephant's memory so they know where to take their herd to get water in the future. Now, staying with animal behavior, the famous sardine run is an epic seasonal massive migration of fish and predators along the southeastern coast of Africa around Cape Town, Cape Horn area. And the sardines follow this path up here. Actually, there are billions of them in shoals up to 220 miles long, and they travel northward following the cooler water that hugs the coast for hundreds of miles. So all these sardines are doing this way out of the sight of what we can see. This is the largest mass migration of any living organism on the planet. Chasing and following these pint-sized fish on their epic journey include hungry predators like seabirds, dolphins, and sharks looking for a meal. Then the sardines when they're under attack, form circulating, tightly knit, undulating balls, making them harder to catch individually. Then the chasing prey try to slice up these underwater, constantly moving, tornado-like vortex of sardines to feast on. So sharks will follow them, and then it will attack these giant tornado-like vortex of things, as well as dolphins and seabirds attacked from the air. So they are being attacked this way, and birds dive on them, and this creates a feeding frenzy, but is a war waged out of sight to us, the general public. And there's something that I learned in grade school I wanted to bring up. This is a bit different about animals, but animals a long time ago. The La Brea Tar Pits in the city of Los Angeles, California, is a giant pool of sticky, gooey, natural asphalt that seeped to the surface from the ground below for tens of thousands of years. So the oil came up and became like asphalt in texture and density, and was a big pile of gooey, sticky asphalt. From 11,000 to 50,000 years ago, it trapped about 4,000 unique animals, causing their death. Animals would wander in the tar pit, become trapped, and die. Predators would then enter this black glue to eat the stuck, vulnerable prey and get stuck dying too. Thousands of small and large extinct animals with their skeletons intact have been excavated. The bones are collected, the tar is cleaned from them, and the assembled skeleton is put on display for all to see. This Ice Age fossil collection includes saber-toothed tigers, giant sloths that when stood up, each 12 feet tall, woolly mammoths, mastodons, and mainly wolves that caught a lot of wolves, but no humans. And it had extinct birds, snakes, mollusks, insects, giant sloths, and camels. This liquid pit and ossified remains recovered offer a rare glimpse into the late ice age that we've just had. And speaking of that, a frozen, intact, desiccated woolly mammoth with fur and flesh, actually a baby one, was found in Siberia 10 years ago. It is 39,000 years old and is now being examined in detail. There's all this talk about getting their DNA, but they haven't got that yet. And speaking of animals long ago, in Denali National Park in Alaska, there are dinosaur tracks that have been found embedded in a cliff. Fossilized prints of three-toed hadrosaurs, or plant-eating dinosaurs, and theropods, or meat-eating dinosaurs like Albertosaurus, a cousin of T-Rex, were discovered. These dinosaurs once roamed this Alaska region some 70 million years ago. The tracks were made in mud, and the mud turned into stone over time, and the flat ground they walked on was uplifted into a cliff. Who would ever have thought that dinosaurs would be in Alaska? And in Alaska like this. This is in Toro Toro National Park in Bolivia, the same situation. 3,500 dinosaur prints and trackways have been found. 8 different species of dinosaurs have been ID'd with footprints that range in size from 8 to 20 inches. These dinosaurs lived some 86 million years ago, and the wetlands they trekked through became stone with their tracks imprinted on it. Huge stegosaurs and large carnivores once roamed here. What a great family trip to take to be able to see where dinosaurs once walked, and here's one of their prints right here that you can follow. And speaking of stone, here's another fascinating place. In Carlsbad Caverns National Park in New Mexico is a cave system called the Lechagula Cave that is 126 miles long and down some 1,600 feet below ground. It is the 5th largest cave in the world. This cave is a fantastic array of gypsum and sulfur deposits that over thousands of years have made some spectacular formations that drew from the cave ceilings plus on the cave floor, including 20-foot gypsum chandeliers like this. This is Persian compared to them right there, that are very fragile, delicate, intricate, and fantasy-shaped creations. Additionally, there are 20-foot gypsum hair and beards, 18-foot soda straws, cave pearls, rusticles, and speleotherms, which are stalactites and stalagmites on steroids. Sulfuric acid from nearby oil deposits that made hydrogen sulfide dripped into the cave, then dissolved cave bacteria to make these fanciful, magical-looking creations. A rare bacteria exists in this cave that feed on the sulfur, manganese, and iron minerals to assist them in making these fascinating formations. They are totally unique and can be only found in this dark, quiet, and mysterious place. And so now I thought I'd talk about colors. We always talk about formations, but what about colors? And this is a festival in India called the Holi Festival, and is a Hindu ancient celebration of good over evil. People gather the night before the Holi to perform religious rituals and pray for the destruction of evil. The next morning, the carnival starts by smearing happy participants with brightly colored powders, maybe using water guns or paint balloons to paint themselves. There is singing and dancing in the streets as people parade around, and the colored powders enhance the celebration of good over evil. Okay, that's what people do. Now, how can we find this in nature? Lake Redba in Senegal, Africa, which is on the very west coast of it, right here. Well, there's a pink lake that is 1 square mile. Its color comes from salts washed down from nearby mountains. The salt is collected from the bottom of this lake by locals, then dried and sold. There are 7 such pink lakes located around the world, like in Russia and southern Australia on an island. These are potash evaporation ponds in Utah. They are not for swimming, but are used to harvest potash or potassium-containing salts. This process takes about 300 days and helps isolate the potassium chloride. The evaporation process changes the mixture to an electric blue color, which is enhanced by the red surrounding bedrock. And this is in Utah and does look like that from above. This scene creates a kaleidoscope of psychedelic colors in the desert. Potassium chloride is used to make fertilizers that enriches soil, low blood pressure, enriches soil, makes low blood pressure medications, and in soaps. Speaking of colors, in the districts of Luoping and Jiangling, China, there are thousands of acres of fields of rapeseed flowers or canola flowers that bloom in early March, which are harvested later for canola oil. This colors the hillsides and man-made terraces with a colored carpet of golden yellow. And what the Chinese do is they sometimes put signas in there, like a yin-yang symbol, or other symbols or Chinese characters in these landforms so that they look like from above. This then attracts, all these flowers attract millions of bees that pollinate these plants. Local farmers cultivate the land there, harvest the bounty, and keep bees, then in turn provide them with honey to sell for these very fields. And what the Chinese are famous for is, in terms of land management, is making terraces out of things. That way the land doesn't erode and wash away, which we'll get to later on. Another fascinating area is in Holland that produces tulips. You wonder where they come from? It's here. Tulip bulbs are planted in the fall, start popping up from the ground in late March, and then bloom in late April. There are 3,000 varieties of tulips and come in every color under the sun, like red, yellow, orange, purple, pink, and white. The long stems then are cut, which we'll get to. Now this picture here was in your Daily Sun in October, showing the same picture here, which I have here. So it was in our newspaper only about last month. So how do they harvest them? Well, they have machines like this that are cut by machines, and then they're sent to enormous warehouses like this one in Holland here. And then there's an auction for these as buyers, I'm sorry. Got it. And there's an auction here as buyers sit in stands as big cartloads of tulips are paraded past them. Bids are taken by hand signals, and then savvy buyers use them to deliver worldwide. So this is how the tulips get to your house, this way. And speaking of colors that color the world, how about lavender fields in France? And lavender is used to make things smell wonderful, it's fresh and clean, and they look like this. Other colors? How about red hot chilies in the Gobi Desert? They're all dried out here, and this is how they're done. The Gobi Desert, by the way, is in northern China and Mongolia, and they're dried this way. Another fascinating place where colors are these marimold moss balls. And what they are really seaweed that is in the Sea of Japan, and somehow or other they roll into balls on their own. And they're underneath the water, and sometimes they're washed ashore. They're much bigger than bowling balls, and they come across like this. Who would have ever thought this could possibly exist? Now we're going to move on, speaking of water, we're going to move on to the western North Pacific Ocean, where the crescent-shaped Mariana Trench near Guam, which is east of the Philippines. And it's right in here. Now, this is a fascinating place because it's the deepest place in the whole world. It causes a chasm in the seafloor that runs for 1,500 miles because two continental plates collide here and is up to 44 miles wide. It averages about 5 miles deep. The deepest part, though, of the Mariana Trench is called the Challenger Deep, and it's 36,000 feet deep. You could take Mount Everest, turn it upside down, and there'll still be a mile left. That's how deep this is. And it's a fascinating place to explore. It is now being studied by oceanographers. It hovers around 35 degrees, making it the coldest water on the planet. It's in a crescent shape here, it goes here. This is the statistics. And the Mariana Trench is here, not too far from Guam. And in order to explore it, they use these special devices to go underwater that are under high pressure. Going this far down, it's 15,000 PSIs. And one guy who did it is James Cameron, the film director. He holds the record diving the deepest, about 35,000 feet. He's also visited the Titanic also. So this guy's on the cutting edge of what's going on. The pressure there is about 15,000 psi. The trench's ocean floor has a yellow color to it due to decaying plants, animals, shells, and skeletons that continuously fall into it. Although this water is considered toxic because of the super cold water and high acidity, there's still life surrounding it. Hot water vents that emit minerals such as hydrogen sulfide that feed the bacteria, that feed the microbes, that in turn feed the fish. So there are living things down there, and they look like this. And at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, yes, we found a plastic bag. So this is what happens when we have too much plastic in the world. However, it's a national landmark, a national monument. It comprises 95,000 square miles and is a refuge below and above water. Now another unique place that's very different is Dalal in northeast Ethiopia in Africa. It's one of the most remote, hottest, and driest places on Earth. It lies in the Danakil Depression where 3 tectonic plates meet and is the chaos of intense hydrothermal activity. So it meets in this area here in Ethiopia, around this part here of northwest Ethiopia. Underground hot magma below heats up a large salt deposit on the surface that created this bizarre ground condition. This hot and smelly hell-like landscape is a cauldron of burning salt, volcanic rock, sulfuric acid, and is otherworldly in nature. It lies 400 feet below sea level and can reach 130 degrees here. The variation in color alone is fantastic, with bright yellows, pink, shades of white, turquoise, black, red, orange, dark, and green lime crusts that surround these toxic chemical pools. In this place, one will find concentrated sulfuric lakes, a cinder volcano, lava lakes that light up the nighttime sky, salt and potash deposits, geysers, green acid ponds, and salt lake plains. So there's a huge wedge of magma underneath this area, and it heats up this salt plain, and it makes all these fantastic creations, as well as very poisonous, dangerous area for people to visit. And near the Dalal volcano, poisonous gases are released from underground, like hydrogen sulfide and chlorine, and so it's best to wear a gas mask near it. Numerous unusual structures, like small stone towers, are created by hydrothermal activities consisting of recrystallized minerals that have undergone rapid evaporation. This is a barren, desolate, arid, and forbidding place. However, it is a natural wonder unknown to most world travelers and tourists. Here's a caldera there, for instance. Speaking of calderas, there's an island called Island Nation in the South Pacific, about 1,500 miles east of Australia, called Vanuatu. Now, Vanuatu is in the South Pacific, and there's a volcanic island there called Ambrym Island. And at the bottom, there's a volcano on this island. Actually, there's a volcano there, and on this volcano, at the bottom of it, 1,400 feet down, is a boiling red, orange hot lava lake that is 200 feet across. In order to study it and get near it, scientists must rappel down by rope to go to ledges like this to study this, because they want to measure the temperature, they want to measure the viscosity of the lava, etc. And from this vantage point, one can admire the fiery molten lava. And it has a sister volcano called Benbow near it, which has a lava lake to descend to also. Most people have never seen a boiling soup of magma, which is what this is, but it's dangerous to get to. And speaking of areas that are forbidden, the Darvaza gas crater in Turkmenistan, which is west of Russia here, is a natural gas field that has collapsed into a cavern in the desert there. This crater is 230 feet wide and is locally known as the Gates of Hell. The crater was created in '71 when a Soviet drilling rig accidentally punched into a massive underground gas cavern. The surrounding ground then collapsed and poisonous fumes then began leaking out at an alarming rate. So the Soviets set it afire, hoping it would burn itself out. But 50 years later, it's still burning and looks like this. And this is why they call it the Gates of Hell. Fascinating area. Now we're going to jump to a different part of the world and something less hot. This is the Great Barrier Reef, the largest coral reef system in the world. It's along the northeastern coast of Australia. It's in the Coral Sea just off the coast of Queensland. It stretches for 1,400 miles. It's composed of 2,900 individual reefs with 900 smaller islands. So it's right here. It's away from the north, off Queensland, in the northeast part of Australia, and it's separated from the continent by about 200 miles of water. And this barrier reef runs this way, like this, for a very long distance. In total, it's half the size of Texas, or as big as Italy or Germany. It's as long as 70 million football fields, and it averages 200 feet deep and separated from the coast with actually a 100-mile channel. I was wrong. It's about 20 million years old and can be seen from space, and 2 million tourists visit it a year. This king-size wonder is a home to an astonishing array of wildlife, marine wildlife. It contains 1,600 species of tropical fish, 3,000 species of mollusks, 600 species of starfish and sea urchins, 215 species of birds, 130 species of sharks and rays, 6 species of sea turtles, sea snakes, reptiles, and 30 species of whales and dolphins. 105 of the world's fish species live here. This reef also boasts seagrass areas, mangrove forests, and dozens of caves. It's the world's largest single structure made by living organisms. It is maintained by billions of microscopic organisms called coral polyps, with 400 different types of hard and soft corals. The polyps continually divide and connect as they appear to be a slow-growing garden that protect and nurture and maintain marine life. As more coral grows on top, the cycle repeats itself, which has been going on for millenniums. So there's a little animal inside these coral polyps, and they build a hard external skeleton made up of carbon calcite. So coral is made up of many small animals. These tiny animals build this hard external skeleton to make the vibrant structures that we recognize. And then algae grows on top of this coral, and it has a symbiotic relationship with the coral. The algae produces chemicals to protect it from the bright sun, like a sunscreen, and the algae use photosynthesis to harness solar energy to make sugars. In this way, the algae provide food and oxygen, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis for the coral, so they both need each other. The coral protects and provides nutrients for the algae. The algae also give the coral its many colors. So there's algae growing on top of the coral, which is how you get this. The coral and algae have evolved together to survive within a particular temperature range. As sea temperatures rise due to climate change, the algae begin to produce products toxic to the coral, which in turn expels the algae. This process is called bleaching because the coral then becomes white and is a death sentence. Now there's so much bleaching that we've lost half the coral reef because of this. This is due to two aspects. First of all, it's about, I'm going to say the big CC, climate change. We put in every year 400 gigatons of CO2 into the air. And over decades we've done this. What happens is two things. It traps, the CO2 traps the sunlight from coming in, not from coming in, it traps the heat from the sun and doesn't make it go back out, it acts like a blanket. And secondly, what it does is it makes the water more acidic. The carbon dioxide gets absorbed by the oceans, make a slight carbonic acid, and these two features, sea rise temperature and specifically the pH level, destroys this kind of situation. So this one is on us. We have a lot of lectures here by a lot of well-learned people about climate change, and specifically many of them denying it, and they have wonderful presentations. They give a lot of graphs and charts showing it this way. In my opinion, a lot of this is because we've climate change is because we put our foot on the accelerator and put gasoline on the fire to cause these problems. And I will show you this in particular. You might think that these situations are far away and tens of thousands of miles, so what does that have to do with me? Well, if we keep on doing things like the villages expanding down south, for instance, and we're taking away land there that was natural habitat for a lot of animals down there, as well as the natural beauty down there. How much will this pertain to? So that's what's going on there. This is what coral bleaching looks like before and after. And the coral then becomes weak and then gets washed away in storms and becomes broken up in millions of pieces. And this is what happens to what we have done. Now I'm going to change gears here and talk about Patagonia, which is located on the southern end of South America, and is a vast, largely uninhabited area shared by Chile and Argentina. This is the bottom part of South America, the tip of it at the bottom, where Chile runs a whole distance here, along with Argentina. This is a vast area. Area contains 300,000 square miles big and includes regions of the Andes Mountains and the Tierra del Fuego. Millions of years ago, massive glaciers and geological upheavals created majestic, postcard perfect mountains, valleys, glaciers, alpine lakes, forests, steppes, lagoons, and rivers. It is considered to be a desert and semi-arid as little rain falls here. So what can you do there? Well, it's not that well traveled to, I'll be honest, but you can take tourists and come here and walk on the glaciers. They can also see these kind of landscapes. It's a very lonely and kind of desolate area. And they can also see wildlife. Tourists come here to see llamas, penguins, again, by the Chile and South Argentina area. And they can see this kind of wildlife. There's also, tourists can see the Cave of the Hands there, where 9,000 years ago, people came and made drawings on inside a cave by a rock cliff. This is the Cave of the Hands is in this area here, and they made these kind of drawings. That would be spectacular to see something this old to see. Also, you could see the Perito Moreno Glacier, the world's biggest advancing glacier. This glacier is 20 miles long, 3 miles wide, and 200 feet tall, and advances 7 feet a day. You can stand on a platform here and watch the ice fall off into the water. And in this area, there's about a dozen granite peaks that are very significant. This is Mount Fitzroy, it's 11,000 feet tall, as well as Sierra Torre, another granite peak, 10,000 feet tall. Notice that there are glaciers here. This will bring down sediment and wear down the mountain, and then fall off and go into a lake. We'll be talking about these kind of procedures in a little bit. But I wanted to show you that. And in this area, particularly in northern Patagonia, Chile area, is a world-renowned Atalufa River, nicknamed the Terminator. This river careens through steep glaciated Chilean Andes. And what you can do is you can go on a river raft trip, and then it's about a 4-day trip, and you can stop at these various camps when you go through it here on this trip. But it descends 1,000 feet in elevation. And most rafting trips take 4 days, descend this amount with campsites along the way that I showed, and you get lush vegetation, vertical canyon walls along the sides, and one will experience towering waves, large black boulders strewn around, broody cliffs, and the roar of the fast-moving water. It is considered the most difficult commercially run rapid in the world. The river is rated between class 4 to 5, meaning dangerous. So take a ride on the wild side. And speaking of places underwater, these are hydrothermal vents, and they are located mainly where tectonic plates converge in the oceans. They are underwater chimneys made of rock and salt, and they're places where tectonic plates meet. The seawater becomes superheated by hot magma below the ocean floor and begins to dissolve minerals. So in these areas, there's a large pool of magma, which is very hot, that then causes the water that comes in to be gushed out, and you get chimneys or smokers built up. You get hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, methane, manganese, and iron coming out of this. So it builds up a mound from dissolved minerals. And it makes these smokers or chimneys. These deep sea vents can be 200 feet tall and churn out 750-degree water that's mineral rich. It's like a cocktail, a toxic cocktail of water. There are tall black smokers spewing sulfur and smaller white ones that exude carbon dioxide. With these extreme temperatures, near freezing away from the chimneys because it's so deep, and super hot conditions up close, lack of sunlight, and chemicals that could kill us, life still thrives here, which excites scientists. So by these vents that you wouldn't think would have any kind of life by them, there's still life down there, even 2 miles down. And they hang near animals like this that don't have any pigment to them because there's no sunlight. They hang around these chimneys because they can get bacteria around them to eat, plus they can be warmed up in this area. So life still exists there, and even these kind of crabs in these situations. Now this excites scientists because if sulfur-based and sulfur-based bacteria and carbon-based life can exist here in bacterial form, it could as well exist on other planets and moons with interior oceans in our solar systems, like Jupiter's moon called Europa. So Europa has a thick shell on it that's about 10 or 15 miles of ice. Underneath that shell, there's an ocean under it that could harbor bacterial life because it could have these hydrothermal vents that we've been talking about, and this increases circulation down there and causes heat. And where there is heat, water, and appropriate chemical elements, microbial life could exist in the oceans underneath this ice shelf on this one moon. Same thing could exist on one of the moons called Enceladus, which is Saturn's moon. This moon has a thick layer of ice with major surface cracks at the South Pole that blasts huge geysers of liquid salt water from the subsurface ocean under pressure into space. So giant plumes are set in space and then come back as snow and ice. And this is what it actually looked like in a space shot from the South Pole of this moon, is that you can see them coming out. And if you can see this from a couple thousand miles away, that means they're a big deal. So this excites scientists because, again, there might be hydrothermal vents down there, and it could harbor some kind of a life in terms of bacteria. Speaking of ice, this is Baltoro Glacier, one of the longest glaciers in the world, and is in northern Pakistan, in the Himalayan region. It runs east to west, is 39 miles long and 3 miles wide. It is a river of ice that slowly carves and grinds its way along this remote, uninhabited mountain. Forms depressions in the scouring land also. So it's like a big river of ice that looks like this in northern Pakistan. And it moves very slowly. It has different areas where different speeds go of it, not very fast, and it even contains rock and materials here. So it's like a big, giant river of ice that moves. And it actually forms these fantastic places, like glacier lakes surrounded by tall walls of blue ice, thousands of years old. And the terminus ends in the Shigar River, which sustains local agriculture and towns. And it looks like this. And then now, as promised, we're going to talk about the victims of an accelerated warming Earth, and they will tell their story. This will particularly be true in the Arctic, and there's a reason for this about when we see climate change, in particular man-made problems. This is the Mendenhall Glacier. This is the world's most famous poster child for climate change. And I'll give you a lot of then and nows. This glacier has receded 2 miles in the last 100 years. Then and now, 58, we were kids, and now. Give you some more. Then and now. If you can see, the height of the glacier has been gone. It's receded back quite a bit. Then, and here's the end of the glacier. That doesn't look very robust to me. That looks like a sick glacier to me. Mendenhall Glacier used to be bigger, and the height of the glacier used to be up here in 68, and over here, and the front of the glacier used to be here, and now it's just reduced to this area, a big, loud-sounding nothing when you go there. It should be much, much more robust. Same thing with the Pasteur Glacier in Austria, that once looked like this, and now looks like this, and here's the end of it. This is in Greenland, and this 1 mile, there is a 1 mile thick ice cap covering Greenland, and it has for thousands of years, and now melting faster than the snowfall can keep up with it. In the last 26 years, Greenland has increased its temperature every single year. Yes, there are natural processes that do this. I understand that, but we are putting the foot on the accelerator causing this. This then, with the melting of the Greenland ice cap, is injecting the ocean with billions of gallons of water, fresh water, which contributes to sea level rise. Huge quantities of ice water then falls into cracks and large fractures on the ice sheet, causing it to pool at the bottom, melting and lubricating the glacier from below. So this is basically Greenland, and now it's really melting away. And why it affects in the Arctic is because of the albedo effect. That means when sunlight hits the snow, it gets reflected back into space because it's white. But with a warming Earth, there's more water, there's more melting going on. This then absorbs the sun's energy, thereby making the problem even worse and causing greater situations. It just keeps on adding on and on to the process of melting away. So it's really the sun that gets absorbed by the dark colors of the exposed water. Huge quantities of ice then are basically melting away. And what that comes down to is when it gets injected in the ocean, the fresh water is lighter than the salt water. The salt water stays at the bottom, the fresh water on top. There's a bit of a temperature change, and that's enough to drive ocean currents to cause temperature problems. A warming Earth also has more moisture in it. When there's more moisture, then you can get catastrophic floods that always seem to happen all the time. How many times have we heard about 500-year storms, 100-year storms, 50-year storms that happen once every decade? This is because of a warming Earth, and yes, for the most part, we are, in my opinion, responsible for this. So this is why our climate is changing and why cities have to put billions of dollars like Miami to protect their coastline. And how this comes into play, this is more than just Greenland and Great Barrier Reef. On Siberia's Yandi Peninsula, there are round holes in the earth that have been appearing in the Arctic tundra. These holes can be 80 to 150 feet deep. They are not sinkholes. They're 80 feet wide and 150 feet deep. They're not sinkholes in the limestone bedrock like we have here in Earth in Florida, but instead are openings created by underground methane explosions. As the Arctic slowly warms from decades of man-made climate change, methane that has been locked in the permafrost and frozen for thousands of years finds its way to the surface. When it interacts with air, it can cause violent underground explosions with soil and rock thrown away from the area. This is what happens when permafrost melts. And in some areas, you can poke a hole in the permafrost here and then light a fire to it, and it will go up into a flame in some areas. This is another example of something going wrong here at the Bataglia crater in Siberia. I can't pronounce that. 500 miles northeast of Yakutsk in Siberia lies a depression or megaslump that is a half-mile long and 200 feet deep. A road once started here, and all the local trees were cut down to clear the way. Over time, the barren area was cut and had no shade, and the once solid permafrost just below the ground melted, causing the whole area to cave in into one big collapsed, jumbled mess. So all because we took away the shade, and the permafrost then collapsed into this. Another example of this is Easy Lake near Kitsuba, Alaska, which I have no idea in Alaska where that is. It lies has a lake there, but has methane leaks in it, and tons of methane bubbling from the water surface in the summer. In winter, the methane freezes to make these odd bubble-shaped bergs. A hole in the bottom of the lake releases tons of methane a day because the permafrost ground below has been fractured and trapped leaked gases. So this is what we talk about methane as a gas, but what does it look like frozen? It looks like this. These are real pictures. And with continued global warming, this is warming the Earth much faster, and we see these kind of incidents more often. Another example of man-made problem is a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, just below the south of Louisiana, just below or south of it, where the Mississippi Delta empties into the Gulf of Mexico. It's a 6,300 square mile area, and it's the size of the state of New Jersey. It was created by excess fertilizers, manure, and nutrients farmers in the Midwest use to increase crop production. These chemical compounds then run off into the Mississippi and are deposited in the Gulf of Mexico. And then these nutrients create large algae blooms that sink, decompose, and deplete the area. So the nutrients cause algae blooms. The algae blooms sink, and it uses up oxygen, and therefore no life can be in the area. This has been going on for a long time now. When I used to live in Pensacola, we used to know people that went into this area to test it from the EPA to see if it's growing smaller or bigger. So this affects thousands of square miles, and now it's barren and devoid of life. So there's a price to pay for the corn and soybeans we consume. And speaking of dead zones, there are a lot of them throughout the world. Kind of like this on a smaller scale, like on the west coast of America, on the east coast, the Gulf, obviously, in the Mediterranean and in the North Atlantic by Europe, wherever there's a lot of people, and around China and Japan area. So there's about 24 of them, and they are considered to be troublesome for what's going on in the world. This should not occur that much. But with 8 billion people in the world, we need crops, and they need to be fertilized, and that fertilizer runs off into various rivers that run into giant seas, and this is what we get. Speaking of water, there's brine lakes, or small salty pools that exist underwater in the north part of the Gulf of Mexico. These small ponds can be just 1 meter across or be 12 miles long. So in an area in the Gulf of Mexico, there are brine lakes underwater here, and they look like this. So the salt water collects underneath because it's heavier, as said, and the fresh water is on top of it. And speaking of salt, there's the Salzburg salt mine in central Austria in the Bavarian mountains, and a place that salt has been mined since the Bronze Age. It exists right here. And what's going on here is a large subterranean network of mines and tunnels have been hollowed out by countless local generations to obtain and mine essential mineral salt that we all need. This salt mines existed all the way since the Roman times, and they made vast tunnels to go into these areas. Now tourists can take this and take tram rides into it, and even can see a church inside of it made out of salt, figurines. I think that's fascinating. It's a lighted underground Catholic church. And changing gears a bit, about 1,400 miles northwest of Hawaii lies the Midway Atoll in the North Pacific Ocean. And this, they call it Midway because it was halfway between Hawaii and Japan. So both countries needed it in the war in World War II, around 1942. There was a battle fought there, and on this island right here, because you can land planes on it. You can land planes on it. And in this 1942 battle between the Japanese and American forces, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers, a cruiser, 292 aircraft, and lost 2,500 men. America lost aircraft carrier Yorkton, a destroyer, 145 aircraft, and suffered 300 casualties. This battle was a decisive blow to the Japanese Army and Navy, but now you can visit it and check out what it's like underneath the water. You can see aircraft carriers in this. There are many travel agencies that can take you on trips and go to Normandy and see what happens there. But that's conceptual what happened there. You have to imagine the battle that ensued there, where all our men, thousands of men, lost their lives and heroically did things. But here you can see them up close and personal and see the carnage of war this way, rather than conceptualize it. And then moving on to the Far East, deep within China's Hunan province lies towering stone pinnacles that are thrust into the air. These are made of quartzite and sandstone and seem frozen in time as they are protected in a national forest that thousands of tourists yearly see. Dozens of these stone pillars can be up to 300 feet tall and are also the backdrop for the original Avatar movie, and now called the Avatar Hallelujah Mountains. They're inspiring and breathtaking. So if you want to know how people get ideas, well, this is one of the ideas. This is how they were done. Now we're going to move on to two deltas. The Ganges Delta is in southern India and Bangladesh and is a triangle shaped and covers more than 41,000 square miles and is at the lower part of India down to the southern part and empties into the Bay of Bengal. And it looks like this. This is the world's largest delta and receives snowmelt from the Himalayas. It actually travels quite a bit of distance, about 1,500 miles, and it drains 1/4 of India and is really a slow-moving river that deposits sediment. Now, the sediment from this Ganges Delta, actually, this is what it looks like, the delta down here. What's going on here is that, you remember the Himalayas where Mount Everest is? Well, all those have glaciers on them, all those mountains. Those glaciers then melt over time, and the meltwater then goes into streams that are taken and emptied down south into a delta. It's a braided stream delta here. It's super large. So what you're seeing here is a transfer. Nothing is gained or lost in the world. It all just is recycled. So the Himalayas are slowly being eroded, and the sediment is going downstream to make up this land down here. This is the process of Earth. Everything is recycled in nature. And this produces a rich, fertile land. This floodplain region produces tea, rice, jute, rope, extensive fishing, and is home to 140 million inhabitants. It's a maze of waterways, lakes, and swamps, and is a unique river that many know little about. And there's other kind of deltas too. Besides this, there's one. The Mississippi goes into the Gulf of Mexico. The Nile River then empties into the Mediterranean with deltas like this. And usually where there's a lot of delta, people live because there's so much fertile land there that keeps building up the area. That's what's going on. And one other area is the Yellow River in China. It runs for 3,400 miles, running east to west, and empties into the Bohai Sea. So it starts here and goes all the way up there south of Beijing and goes into here. It's an important river for China because this river originates in the upper Tibetan plateaus and swamplands in the far west, and it runs through 9 Chinese provinces and is considered really the mother of China, as the basin became the epicenter for Chinese economy, culture, and politics. It's a major part of China. You want to know about China? Then know about the Yellow River that does this. And it goes like this. One thing, why is it yellow though for it? Yellow River is that color because the amount of the voluminous silt suspended in the water. The silt comes from China's Loess Plateau, which is slowly being eroded by the river. For 2,000 years, this stream was clear, but when people started, too many people in the area, over thousands of years, China had, oh, what did I do? I don't know what happened here. I'm sorry about that. So, over the years, those forests that China had were cut down to make homes and for firewood. So, the soil then became exposed, which is loose soil, and then became eroded by the river. And that's why this is going on like this. So it's a formation that's being slowly eroded away. And it carries voluminous amounts of silt and sediment down this river and empties into the sea. There is so much silt on this river that you could build a wall with it. The wall would be 1 meter high and 1 meter wide. It would be 3 times the distance between the Earth and the Moon, or 27 times the length of the equator. So there's so much sediment going through it that's why this color is like this, very much like this here. So what the Chinese now have done is terrace a lot of the land where the lowest plateau is, so that this won't be eroded so much, and they can have some slivers of farming land to work with. So the Chinese have done this by hand mainly the last couple of generations. They don't want to lose their land to this phenomenon, which the river takes away from. This is one interesting area, speaking of water. This is in Nazaré, Portugal. This is another magnificent wonder, and it's on the west coast, and there are these gargantuan waves that occur there. They're between 80 to 100 feet tall, and they're the world's tallest waves. And you can actually surf down them if you got the guts to do this. And the river actually, the water is taken from a canyon that's 130 miles long and 3 miles deep, and builds up this water before it gets to the coast. So if you're brave enough and want to have millions of tons of water come crashing down on you, then you could get a world's record doing this. I wanted to show you this because I think it's exciting showing people what you can do in the water like this. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is lithium. Everybody here has lithium-powered devices with lithium-ion batteries in your car, in everything that you use, your cell phone, everything. And where does that come from? Well, mining lithium comes from 2 places in Australia where there's open pit mining of lithium that looks like this, and it's also extracted from salts in Argentina and Chile area that we talked about before. So that's where these areas come from, and it's used in many different kind of battery situations. And this kind of talk, I believe, will give you the energy needed, like the Energizer Bunny. And to be able to talk about this and to experience all these magnificent wonders. And thank you, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for coming. If you'd like to have any questions or comments, you can. I certainly cause enough trouble every time I talk. So, I want to appreciate you guys coming here. And I will have a 7-minute show.